Thank you for attending the meeting. You are the first participant. Please hold.
put it in a pocket, yeah.
I don't know where I clipped it. I don't have a pocket.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay. Okay, welcome
I don't know
everyone.
where to clip it.
Welcome
Can I do
to
that?
our presentation of candidates for the International Program Development Directorship, Associate Dean of the Outreach School. Today we have Maria Alm, who is the Dean of Arts and Humanities and Communications
And social sciences.
At the University of Wisconsin Stout. She's had a career as a faculty member in modern languages, particularly in Russian. She's headed international offices in Northern Iowa and at Stout, as well as being Dean currently at UW Stout. And she's here to share with us her thoughts. If you have any comments on this candidate or any of the candidates, you have until Monday evening to get them to me via email, dmessenge@uwyo.edu, dmesseng@uwyo.edu. Monday is the cutoff, so get your comments to me if you can, or if you're interested in making such comments. So we'll turn it over to Maria, and she'll give us a talk, and then we'll have some time for questions.
Thank you. So I'd like to start by thanking you all for being here. Thank you very much for coming to my presentation. I know that you've all done a lot of work already in the area of international education at the University of Wyoming and also in the state of Wyoming. I'll see what I can contribute to your conversation here. I also assume that you're all here because you're passionate about international education and not for extra credit, right? Okay? You are passionate about this field. You are here because you want to change or you want to improve, and we can always improve what we're doing. Right? Because also the world changes around us. We need to change too. So I'm going to talk, the title I was given for my presentation, and I do not have any slides. I made a decision to try it without slides and see how it goes. If that was a poor decision, I very much hope that the committee will let me know that. I did explain to Dave that the last institution I interviewed at, I had beautiful slides prepared, and they could not get the technology to work. So perhaps that had something to do with my decision today. I don't know. Part of nonconformity, I guess. But the topic was your vision for internationalization at the University of Wyoming, which is a very difficult topic when you're not from Wyoming and don't really know more than what you can read on the internet or by talking to colleagues maybe who have worked here, who've been here in the past. So I will start by talking about internationalization in general, and then I'll kind of jump back and forth from what I know. And if I say something that really doesn't apply to Wyoming, you can let me know that later too. It's okay, I only know what I know. So my vision for internationalization, right? And I would say this about any institution of higher education. It needs to be part of your mission. It needs to be part of the mission of the institution. If it's not part of the mission, then I don't know, why are you here, okay? It needs to be part of the vision, and it needs to be integrated into the university at all levels, okay? And across the entire campus community and across your entire local and regional community. I think the university has, as part of its mission, outreach, right? It's outreach to the community, and internationalization should be part of that outreach to your state. In terms of vision, so I always start with vision. As I was researching the University of Wyoming, I found this report, this executive summary, right, on advancing internationalization, completed with ACE, the Internationalization Laboratory. You have a vision. I can't come in and tell you to change your vision, okay? A lot of work clearly went into this document. I have just the executive summary here. I don't want to carry around too much paper, but a lot of work went into this report. The vision has been established. Can you review? I think mission, vision, right, should be reviewed periodically, but I don't think there's any need to reinvent the wheel. Were any of you here part of the group that worked on this report? Did you all work on it? You should be very proud of it. It's very good, right? Hope you realize that. It's very good. Only 2 people worked on this. Has everybody else read it? Have you all read this? Okay, good. was a large group. It was a very large group, and it was comprehensive. And unless things have changed drastically in 3 years at the University of Wyoming or in the state of Wyoming, I really think there was a great vision. It could be revisited to see if a new group would want to make any changes. But I think that the vision has been developed by the people here. Any vision needs to be developed by the people, by the local people, okay? And it's not one person, it's not my, I said, your vision, you don't want to know my vision, it's your vision, it's our vision. So I think this is absolutely excellent document. I think that where you start, mission, vision, definition. What do you mean by internationalization? How do you define it? Because it means different things to different people. So does globalization. What's the difference between internationalization and globalization, and which are you really trying to accomplish? And once again, what do you mean by those terms? And I think you need to know that. We need to know that before we can move to the next step. Everything is steps. You see, and I'll keep coming back to my steps. I am not purely a linear thinker. I tried to make a linear presentation here for you. Don't worry, it's going to become spherical and circular very soon. But anyway, mission, vision, definition. So then I read further in your report. You have a definition too. It's great. Makes my job really easy. There's a definition based on ACEs, right? Definition of internationalization. Once again, I think one can always review the definitions, but it's very important that everyone at the institution agree on, or maybe not everyone will agree on, but that we all know what it is exactly we're trying to achieve. I think that, once again, mission, vision, definitions, a lot of that work was done 3 years ago, and so I would start here and move to the next task, which is implementation, right? Implementation. I suppose everyone's familiar with the document, right? Otherwise, I just realized, wow, I could be projecting some of the document for you so you could, review, right, the vision and the definition of internationalization. But as I said, I think it's a great report. I think it was very well done. A lot of time was put into it. The American Council on Education is an excellent group. And I think the next step is to implement the recommendations. And I know that some work has been done towards the implementation, so it's continuing the work of the implementation. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, I did actually read it, and I've worked in international education, and I can tell that there was a lot of thought put into this document. Where I would start, if we're just thinking about the campus to start with, is our global learning outcomes, which is actually at the very end of the executive summary. I think that at a lot of the meetings and conferences I've attended, there's a lot of conversation getting back to definitions. What do we mean by internationalization? What do we mean by globalization? What are your actual objectives? What are your outcomes? What are the learning outcomes that you expect your students to have achieved? Okay? What is it that you want to see in your graduates? And so I would start, and also I'm talking about what we're doing at my own campus, my UW campus, right? We have a global perspectives requirement, and we have objectives, but they weren't very clearly written. They're older, so we're reviewing and revising them based on the AAC and U's value rubrics. And I think most of you are probably familiar with the value rubrics if you've worked at all in general education or liberal education. And if not, they are a great starting point, right, for learning objectives for a whole variety of areas. So we focused on global perspectives, learning objectives. We have a faculty committee that's been working to modify the value rubrics just because, once again, a lot of work has been done in this area. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Look at the rubrics, look at the objectives, and then figure out which are the ones we want. What works here? What are we trying to accomplish? Okay? Then, where, and they have to be clear objectives. They have to be measurable and attainable. It can't just be, our students will be internationalized or globalized. No. What exactly, okay, do you want your students to know? I can talk about our draft. We look at 4 areas. We want our students to have global self-awareness. We want them to know about themselves, a certain amount of global knowledge, right? It's rather amazing the number of students, and you can ask them, major world event, and where is that happening? Like, maybe all your students know where Syria is? I mean, it's interesting asking some of these questions, surveying, right? What do your students know and not know, and what should they know, okay? Global knowledge, global viewpoint, looking at issues from multiple perspectives, right? We have a perspective, okay? And turning around and looking at it, if you're looking at it from, I don't know, the perspective of someone, it's very interesting to watch. How many of you have watched news reports from other countries, right, in their languages? Isn't it fascinating? The most interesting one I saw, maybe it wasn't the most interesting, but during the Bosnian War, right, and we would have our reporting here about Bosnia and Croatia, and behind the news, so it was the visual cues even more than the words. Behind the news anchor, they would have a map of the former Yugoslavia divided up into, right, Serbia, Bosnia. I went to Russia and saw the news reporting. That map they showed was different. So people are already assuming that territory, and we're framing the question differently. And so how people are understanding the conflict is very different. They have a very different perspective, not to say who's right, who's wrong, but just we don't agree on the maps, and there's a lot of other things we don't agree on. So understanding that there are different viewpoints on different issues. And then the fourth area is global engagement. Really, if we talk about developing global citizens, what do we mean by that? And these are just the various areas, and they're developed in much more detail in the document. And the next thing, once you agree on what are your objectives, how or where are you going to meet them? Is it in the curriculum? Could be in the curriculum. Will it be co-curricular? Is it some kind of experiential or service learning? How are you doing it? And once again, the answer doesn't have to even be the same for everybody. We're looking to meet the objectives in our general education program because we feel very strongly about it, and we feel that we want to have certain common experiences for our entire undergraduate, I'm speaking undergraduate here, undergraduate student population. But that's not the only way to do it. There could be a different way. So what are your objectives? Where? How are you going to achieve them? And then how are you going to assess them? I've done a lot of work on assessment. We're being visited next month by the Higher Learning Commission, so I know quite a bit about assessment at our institution. But what I know is it's really important to assess. Are the students learning what we think they're learning? Because if they're not, we need to change what we're doing, okay? If we send students abroad and they don't come back changed or don't understand a different viewpoint, what have we accomplished, right? Then spent a lot of money and we haven't accomplished our objectives, so what are we doing with this? And so part of it ties into another word we've been using a lot, which is intentionality, okay? You need to know what you're trying to achieve, and you need to intentionally design those experiences. Once again, maybe it's not in the curriculum, okay? Maybe it's co-curricular. Maybe it's interactions with international students. You can define it different ways, but it needs to be an intentional experience. Otherwise, you are just dropping your students here, or you're using the word global and hoping that that somehow, right, meets those objectives. I mean, we don't do this in any other area, right? Why are we doing this in international studies? I mean, you wouldn't do this in calculus. You just expose the students and they'll somehow, right? No, it doesn't work that way. So I keep coming backwards so people see that there is some kind of logic to this, right? Mission, vision, definitions. That's kind of the highest level. Mission, vision, definitions. Then we move down to objectives, right? Assessment. And then the hard part, everyone's going to say the hard part is the how. Yeah, that's the hard part, okay? The how. The how really depends on your institution, your programs. How you do this in an undergraduate program is different than a graduate program. It could be different across the institution. And there are, see, I don't want to carry a lot of books. I always have to have books with me. One book, Internationalizing Higher Education, and they talk about how to internationalize math programs and STEM programs. And there's more than one way to do it. There's lots of books. And I'm guessing that a lot of you have been, or to NAFTA, to the conferences, or are members or are planning to go, one of my recommendations for institutions that are planning to internationalize is send as many people as you can to NAFTA. I know it's expensive, but it's in Denver this May, right? It's in Denver. It's really, really close. And NAFTA is going to have all kinds of panels on, you can go, the global curriculum, right? Internationalizing the curriculum, internationalizing your institution, meeting objectives, assessment, everything. And if you send, and I can look at Susan, right? You have lots of money, right? If you can send a large enough team, yeah, and sadly when we go, last year we didn't have funding to send very many people, and they end up their whole time in meetings with their partner institutions with no time at all to go to the talks, which is really unfortunate. But you need to have those meetings with your international partners because you can't be, this is where everybody comes to meet, so you can't be flying all over the world. You save money by just saying, we're all meeting in Boston, okay? We're all meeting in Denver. But if you can send people to attend some of these panels, right, and hear what other institutions are doing to figure out how can that work here, right, and have, you know, as many, right, particularly sending faculty too, because I've learned, I'm an administrator. Administrators really can't. Hello?
Diane, thank you. Bye.
Am I good?
Yes, you're good.
Hello?
Don't worry.
Okay. I'm not worried. I'm just wondering if there's a question or something. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. But, what? Oh, well, that'd be fine. That's good. That's good. Okay. I thought you said China. That would be interesting. But anyway, okay, that would be great. That would show that, yeah, where are your international partners, by the way? No, I'm going to say, where are your international partners, okay? They should be here as well. Anyway, we've had these conversations. But anyway, so NAFTA and going to some of the panels, because NAFTA has tons of information on their website, lots of publications. Once again, it's looking at and having people find the time. And as I was starting to say, right, administrators, right, a lot of the initiatives have to come from the faculty. Faculty are devising those objectives, right? You can't advise objectives and say, here, you're going to meet these objectives. No way, I don't know your programs. What are the objectives, right? And how are we going to then meet these? So NAFTA. The other institution that I've worked a little bit with, and as I said, there's lots of books, there's lots of great work done already in this area, is CARLA. Are you familiar with CARLA? It's the Center for Applied Research in Language Acquisition at the University of Minnesota. And they developed a series of materials years ago, but I really liked them. They've been updating them, called Maximizing Study Abroad. And they have worksheets. It's great for faculty who are taking students abroad, right, for whom international education is not their primary area, okay? These are faculty experts in, right, biology or, you know, history, not necessarily international education. They have activities that faculty can use pre-departure and or on the trip to have students intentionally, right, address some of the issues they face when they are studying abroad, even if the trip is focused around, let's say, biology or something, right? If you have with your group looked at, for example, the iceberg analogy, you're all familiar with that, right? Or they have worksheets, right, like that faculty can simply use for their program. So it's just another resource, and they talk too about the different objectives. So they have objectives, they have assessment measures, they have activities, and they can help you really intentionalize your work. So that's the first part of my presentation, and part one, right, about curriculum. Part two is what I titled depth and breadth, because if part of the mission, okay, or part of the objective is really focusing on the undergraduate student population, you have objectives that you want to meet there. If you're going to internationalize, it has to mean something. You have to have something that you're assessing. I haven't talked much about graduate education, largely because that really has to be program by program, and I know that there are a lot of opportunities with Fulbrights, with international research conferences, and I think that working with the program directors, they are best poised, right, to determine how they're going to internationalize their graduate programs. But I'm going to move, step back a little bit, because if you really want to be successful at internationalization as a state, you need to start much earlier, like pre-K, okay? Because students, children, get interested in, I think there's a natural interest. Children are naturally interested in everything. So if you can put things in front of them, right, it's not that they're actually sponges, but they'll understand that this is important and they should be paying attention to it. There's been some research done that middle school is actually a really good time to attract students to the study of other languages, to start being somewhat intentional about helping them understand about other cultures, to develop this interest. And I know that you're making some strides in this area. I already heard that you're having middle school and high school students on campus, right, March 4th to celebrate World Language Day. Yes, we should do something similar to Iowa. Excellent, really great. Bringing them to campus, hopefully you're also giving them the idea that they could come to college, right? And they could come to college already having studied a foreign language and being good enough that they can go abroad and study in that foreign language, right? You have to plant the seed early, because I really believe that our students should be learning languages in middle and high school, actually elementary. They should start in elementary. My dream, I always say, if I were king of the forest or could rule the universe, all the students in this country would start Spanish in pre-K, so that by the time they were in junior high, 7th grade, they would be bilingual. I think everyone should be bilingual in Spanish, just what I think. And then they should start their third language or their second foreign language in 7th grade. That would be if I could devise the curriculum. So that we would be, when we think about competition with our European partners, right, how many college students from Europe do you know who are monolingual? How many? Right? That's our competition, okay? This is a competition. If we want to be competitive as a nation, we need to start providing our children, and that's from the earliest ages, right, these kinds of opportunities. So, yes, okay, so you asked me to talk about my vision, okay? Maybe then there's reality that comes in. So how can you accomplish this, or how far can you accomplish it? But you need to advocate for what's right, and you need to say, this is what we should be doing. Okay, what can we do? What can we do now? Okay, how can we start providing these opportunities to at least some children, so at least some are bilingual by the time they start college. If our students were bilingual in college, the whole conversation about objectives would be very different, I think. But I don't hide my language bias. I do have a language background, as you all know, so, you know, I can't pretend it's not there. At the same time, I've been talking about the school children, but you need to be engaging the community. And there's a variety of different ways to engage the local community, and some of it is asking the community, you know, how would you like to be involved? This is what we're doing internationally at the university, right? How would you like to be involved with this? Because a lot of times people go out and say, here, we're giving you this. Well, maybe that's not what you need, right? It's not even what you want. It's not what interests you, right? It's more about hearing what are the needs or desires of the community. I know that my dad was very involved, for example, with Rotary, and Rotary has done a lot of international work. So maybe it's partnering with Rotary. Maybe it's partnering with sister cities. Maybe it's providing study tour opportunities for the local population. Maybe it's involving the international students and getting out into the rural communities. Students oftentimes in rural communities, Wisconsin is rural too. Every state has a rural population. Well, most states maybe. But getting out into the rural communities where students may never have met someone from another country, right? And having them meet someone from another country and talk about it, right? And actually break down some of the barriers before students have the opportunities to travel. What's very important in developing these international kind of initiatives are actually the personal relationships. Because if you do not have the personal relationships, nothing will happen. It's developing those personal relationships so that members of the community will tell us how we can help them, but we can also engage industry partners, business partners, maybe some of our international partners, depending on what we're involved with, to really develop it. What's the other group that takes people to people, right? Exchange. It's really about some of that. It's developing these relationships so that we can have a greater impact. We have some sister cities, and in Menominee we've been working. We have a few members of the city council who are really devoted to internationalization, and so we've been bringing groups from we just recently had a group from Japan visit, and they're meeting largely tied with the community. It's only because some of the people in the community also work at the university that we had much connection with them. I think we should have had more connections, so we're working on that. But it's leveraging what's already going on, finding out what's going on, leveraging things like people to people, sister cities, Rotary, community involvement, and studying languages. Thomas Masaryk said, "You are as many people as languages you speak," which I think is very true. And those of you who are multilingual know that you are in a very different mode when you're in a different, you're code switching, right, in a different cultural context. But these are the skills that other students have around the world, and our students really should develop them as well. So when I say study languages, we all know that language is culture as well. So it's studying other languages and cultures and developing intercultural competencies. And the difficulty with this, it gets back to intentionality. It's the intentionality. What do we mean by intercultural competence and teaching culture? Because I always said, I had a colleague, and we would just always say, culture, it's not tacos and piñatas. Okay? That's surface. That's surface. And so if what you're doing is, the students have a piñata party, excuse me? That's surface. It gets back to that iceberg, right? Analogy. We need all of our students to understand the analogy and to have some kind of deeper experiences on the other side of that iceberg. Because you'll go and travel to a place and say, they look just like me, so they're like me. Really? Or they look different, so they're not like me. Why would you assume that? Right? They could have grown up in exactly the same kind of household that I did. So, moving forward, okay, so starting with the schools, I think you have a laboratory school, and that's a great place to kind of start. You can experiment. My kids went to a lab school, so they called themselves lab rats. It was really kind of fun. We could do a lot of things in the lab school we couldn't do in the public schools, and they had a lot of great experiences, including with foreign languages. I think in terms of, for me still the gold standard for internationalization, for students to be bilingual and then spend a semester or a year abroad taking courses at a foreign institution in that language, in that cultural context, with minimal support, so that they really are experiencing life from the perspective of, I don't know, a Nigerian student or a Russian student or a Chinese student. I know most of our students don't have the linguistic skills to succeed, but yet, no reason why that can't be still, right? Is that what we're going to aim for, or not? To do that, of course, you need to have very close curriculum mapping. You need to find institutions where your students can fulfill degree requirements. And I know that's challenging. Okay, so one of the things that we've been working on is trying to develop long-term sustainable partnerships with international institutions. So maybe our students can't go for a semester, but we could take a faculty-led program there, and maybe their students come here for a semester. So we've developed a lot of asymmetrical exchanges. Our students go for 2 to 4 weeks. Their students maybe come for a semester. We have very interesting financial models that I can share if you're interested. But it's a possibility. And I think those long-term partnerships, if faculty are involved with research, you've developed a research partner. So if you're doing research in, I don't know, my brother is math education. So if you're researching math education and you have a partner, well, actually, I don't know where he's working right now. Well, he's got this group in Salzburg. So then you go and you work with that same institution over a number of years. And the hope is that your students start going back and forth, your faculty are going back and forth, and your community members. So suddenly, it's like a sister city kind of model. But suddenly you've got friendships and deep relationships that are going to be multi-generational, right? It's the way to make something sustainable, is when you have this kind of total involvement. They're difficult to established, you need to find the right place. It's the right place and the right people, and then you need to pass on the relationships. So if you're leading a faculty-led program, you can't be the only one who maintains these relationships. It's like, no, the relationships are key to everything. You need to be widening the circle, bringing in other people if you're going to want this to be sustainable. So we're trying with a lot of our trips to like pass them on. They become, you do it this year, and then you do it this year, and get different people involved with our partner schools. Yeah, good. Not my phone. That's good. Okay. So a couple of examples of our long-term kind of sustainable partnerships. We have a program in Hessen, which is for art. So once again, it's got to be program specific. Our students go for a semester, their students come for a semester, and we've been doing it for like 30 years. I've talked a lot about our grant with Hochschule Darmstadt, and largely because it's a lot of money, and we've been really successful in having faculty go both ways, students go both ways, and we're hoping that it will be long-term and sustainable. It's just started, but because their curriculum matches ours really closely, and our engineers and designers are really excited about it. I mean, they are so excited that the engineers who have been pushing us to add German as a course option, that I think it's going to be sustainable. In terms of other resources, in terms of internationalizing, there's a lot of other community resources. I mean, we have, in our community at least, a lot of emeriti faculty who are great resources for helping with a variety of projects. We have an immigrant population, which has also been helpful as we've started our program in Hmong. And we have international students. I already talked a bit about that. But all of our international students to whom we give scholarships, we require community service. And for some of it, they go to local groups and give presentations. And those have been really successful because local community, right, of different groups may not know much about Pakistan. And what we see about Pakistan in the news, right, is not necessarily always very flattering. So when they have these students from Pakistan who are wonderful representatives of their country, and they talk about what it's really like to live in Pakistan, and they can ask questions, it's really helped internationalize our whole community. I think one of our most successful initiatives has been participation in the YALI program, Young African Leaders Initiative, that President Obama started. We'll be having our third year of YALI Fellows. So these are leaders or future leaders, right, of Africa, very impressive people. It's really competitive to be part of this program. And when they come to Menominee, okay, think about it, Menominee is a small town. Our population is 16,000. We're half your size, okay? So they do rather stick out. And it's been great because the local community has really embraced this. So we have meetings with the community. They get out, and we focus on business and entrepreneurship. And the fellows have just been really great about getting out into the local community. The businesses have opened up to them. And it's been just a great opportunity for our community as well. So where I'm going with this is my depth and breadth section, is that if you want to internationalize and you're thinking more broadly, right, and you're thinking, how do we bring these opportunities? If people can't go abroad, we bring the opportunities to them. Okay, I know you all know this too. I'm preaching to the choir, but just kind of focusing here, right? Bring it to them, okay? And so then it gets back to how do we do that, and then we get back to all the books that have written about this and what are our objectives and how are we trying to meet them and where do we want to partner with. There's a lot of detailed questions, but I mean, you have to start. Sometimes I've used to try to get students to go abroad, I think sometimes you have to, there's a variety of tactics to really have students understand, right, how important this is. And when I was at Iowa, I started going around to classes. I'm a great fan of Gogo Bordello. And I would play that song, Wanderlust King, right, and talk about how you just hang around like a scarecrow in your hometown. Whoa, we had huge numbers of students who went abroad after I did that because it was like challenging them, right? Why would you think that you're an educated person if you've never left your hometown? Why would you think that and have that experience that you bring back to your hometown? You're not supposed to go away forever. You're supposed to come back and bring back, right, what you've learned. Leaving or an international experience is supposed to be transformative. It is supposed to be transformative. If it's not transformative, I don't know what you've achieved. So moving on. Now I'll run out of time. Okay, I have maybe one more point I really want to make is it gets back to the objectives and how do we achieve them, because some other really interesting approach has been taken by Richard Slimbuck and Francis Wu, who gave a keynote presentation at an AAC&U Global Education Conference that I attended. And they titled their work From Doorstep to Planet. And they were talking about, do you know this work? Providing opportunities for students to meet global learning objectives without traveling abroad or going too far from home. Realizing that our students face financial difficulties, we have financial difficulties. So how can we creatively achieve these objectives? Even though, you know, I have my gold standard. I know it's a gold standard, and I don't have any gold. So, you know, what can I do with tin? So what they have done is they call their work the Domestic International Nexus. So they ask a series of questions, right? What kind of students, right? What kind of students do we have, and what kind of students are we trying to create? So they first ask what, and then why are we doing this? You know, they're asking the questions, the what, the why, and they're partly coming at it from the perspective that we want to shape the kind of world we live in, and our students need to have these competencies, have an impact. And then how? It always comes back to the how, right? What are the learning activities that they can engage in? And so they've been working to develop this intentionality and develop programs where they put students in a situation that would appear to them to be foreign. So for example, they're at Azusa Pacific University. They put their students in host families in like the poorest neighborhoods in LA, right? Into very challenging situations where no one speaks English. I have neighborhoods where we live in Minneapolis where no one speaks English too, right? No one speaks English, and you're in a real different cultural environment, and you're dealing with many of the same issues as if you were in an international setting, and it's much, much, much more affordable, because actually the institutions in California, LA is in California, they're not that far away. We're taking students to Native American reservations. We're working with a group in South Dakota and a group in northern Wisconsin. Once again, culturally, linguistically, from many perspectives, very different. And the students are having experiences that really take them outside of their comfort zones and meet many of the objectives that we set for our international programs. So even though we think about internationalization as education abroad, it can be achieved different ways. It can be achieved here. We have large immigrant populations in this country, like really huge, right? So you could develop some of those opportunities here. There's a group in Minnesota, I don't know, Urban Education, right? I forget their exact title. And there's a variety of places that are doing this. I think when it comes down to it, I think the story of internationalization has to be why. We can answer that question for everybody. Why are we doing this? Why is this important? Right? We can answer that question. We can get people excited. And maybe get people giving money. I know it's all about money. I haven't talked about money. People can ask about money, but those are the questions that will come up. So I think I've talked enough. I think I should move to questions. So thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. And oh, you must have questions. I haven't covered everything. I mean, books have been written on this topic. There must be questions, okay? Excellent.
Could you please turn on the speakerphone when you're talking?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. I'm technologically challenged. Haven't been teaching for a long time. So the question is about funding, really, and the kind of parochialism in the state. So you're not using state funds to do this thing, are you? And I could answer no. I was getting federal grants, and then they felt proud. How would you handle that kind of situation? Are you working to apply for grants to bring in extramural money so you don't get this kind of question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you need to apply for grant funding. You need to apply for grant funding. You need to look for private funding, and you need to work to educate the legislature about why these kinds of initiatives are important. Because if you want to develop an international workforce with an international mindset, a global mindset, I mean, if you're thinking from a business perspective, why shouldn't you be spending state funds on international initiatives? You know, the other countries are doing it. I think someone should just get a hold and look at, right, what's Russia doing with education, what's China doing, you know, and I would argue that we can do it better. We just have to do it. We need to make the argument. So you have to look for funding every place, right? Right, yeah. That's not as hard a question as I have a harder one. I don't know if I should tell you our harder question. So this is the question that we asked the candidate, because we have funding. It's called Tuition Remission Fund. No one here is going to report back to Wisconsin, right? So we're allowed to use these funds however we want as an institution, and so a good deal of the money does go to out-of-state students, or to provide some assistance to first-generation students. But we also have a certain amount that we use to support international students to diversify our campus population. So we're waiting for someone to ask, why are you spending that state funds to bring international students here rather than Wisconsin students? Yeah, and so then you have to talk about diversity, and I think that's even a harder argument to make. Because at least in this case, you're sending our students to educate, quote unquote, our students. I have to argue how the international students become our students. So I think it's challenging, and I think in times of fiscal challenges, we need to keep looking at what are we trying to achieve and why are we trying to achieve it, and understanding that we may have some limitations, but we still need to advocate and argue for what we're trying to achieve. So, I don't know.
Yeah, this is Sean Budding from International Programs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, as you set forth your vision for internationalization at our institution, where do you see the role of an international programs office such as ours intersecting with the university's research portfolio and our role in facilitating or supporting international research connections and faculty collaboration?
I think it's absolutely central. I mean, I think the role of the international office is to facilitate anything that we can that involves international endeavors. I mean, I think that offices are here to serve, and I know we have limited resources, but I would think that we would want to be very involved in making connections, especially if you have somebody who wants to do something international. Wow, then let's try to help them write the grant, help them find the place. Our international office last year, we wrote several grants. We didn't get all of them. One of them that was funded was actually a State Department grant from out of China to send our band and choir. We don't have a music program either, but we're sending our band and choir to China, right? And that's not research, but we helped locate the grant. We helped with the writing. They did the faculty part, but we helped with the institutional part, and we were awarded, and it was great. And so we're really excited. With research, we would do the same thing. I don't know if we have any ongoing, well, the one that I talked about was ethics. Our ethics center and Engineers Without Borders is an example. And the office played the same role, helping identify, or people come, it's like a clearinghouse, right? Getting to know what everybody's doing, who can you connect with whom to try to facilitate this. So, once again, how do you do it? We're struggling with how do we connect people with other people on campus. We're big enough that not everyone knows what everyone else is doing, but I think that you certainly can play a role in facilitating. And then, of course, part of the grant, you always have to write in support funds, right, that come back to the international office. You have to write in your overhead, a mistake that's often forgotten. But I think that if it can be done, it can be really successful and a win-win for everybody.
a follow-up question, if I could, since you brought up the grants, both this one for the trip and the Darmstadt project in Germany, and also the Confucius Institute that you're working on. What has been your role in the grant writing, and were you centrally involved in that aspect of the project?
With some of the grants we've written, I have been. With others, less. So I can use, because I have limited time and knowledge too. It's really the time issue. So when we wrote the Confucius Center grant, I haven't been involved with the writing because I have someone who's bilingual in Chinese, and it's all like I brainstorm, I give her the ideas, she writes it. She also, with the faculty, wrote the culture grant, with the music grant, but then I edited. So I was involved at the beginning, setting it up and saying, you guys write this, you should do this, and then in the middle, kind of editing, because I wanted to look at it. I did not edit like the engineers, I didn't edit that one. I just didn't have time, but I had someone else that I trusted who could edit that one, right? And then the budget part, I deal with the budget. So I have to review and approve the budget, which is the part that's really critical. So the role kind of depends on the grant. If we apply for something with Russia, I'll spend more time on it. With the Darmstadt grant, I didn't write anything, to be honest, right? It was more just the brainstorming, the conceptualization, this is what we can do. We had to write a letter of support, so writing letters of support. But I think the role of our office has been facilitation, budget, and then working with our research services office, our grants. We have a really strong grants office where they will really help with a lot of those details too. So it's a team of people, because one person can't do it. So it's a team, and kind of throwing it off. Hey, you have it tonight. Oh, back to you. So.
Yeah, Nate Nicholas with the IPO advisory board. My question is revolving around private fundraising. One of the cornerstones of the International Programs Office is private fundraising, and that'll be a major expectation of the director. What's your experience in the past, and how would you approach it in Wyoming?
So my experience, I started working with private fundraising when I was at the University of Northern Iowa, and we were focused because we were just starting. And we started working with our Emeriti faculty who had connections with our alumni and with largely with our alumni. So our initial efforts, right, with fundraising, where we went to those people who we already knew were committed, right, who were Emeriti faculty, and asked them for their ideas and support, and several of them endowed scholarships themselves. It was surprising. We went to alumni who had really successful study abroad experiences, and they contributed funds, right, helping to endow some additional scholarships. Those were beginning kind of baby steps, because you can start with your local. You already know who's committed, and small amounts. Our College of Education, our dean there, education majors who go into teaching aren't known for making lots of money, but she has worked very hard over the years to develop these connections with the alumni, and if everybody gives $25, before you know it, you have 100,000. Okay, and by working with the alumni on small donations, she's been really successful. So I would definitely work with building that culture. And you never know, one of them might win the lottery someday. You never know, right? So you've got to work with your alumni who've had international experiences, including your international students who may be interested in funding different kinds of initiatives, right? And then you need to branch out and work with different donors. And so my experience in this sense of moving to Stout, we're at the beginning phases of capital campaign, so I've been very much involved in planning the campaign, in beginning donor relationships, but you need to develop the relationship. So my work so far has been deciding who should we have a relationship with. Nobody's really been working on this. So we've been reconnecting with alumni, reconnecting with industry partners, reconnecting with our advisory boards, and working very hard to build those relationships as we're developing our case statements. You need to explain to people why. You can't just say, give me money. You want to know what I'm going to do with it, and I need to explain to you very clearly, right? Funding student scholarships, fairly easy to raise money for, but faculty professional development, really hard. We've actually done it by calling it teaching excellence, because in order to be an excellent teacher, you need to have some international experiences. So we kind of stretch the definitions, and we've been pretty successful there, somewhat as well. But yeah, so we're building the relationships and working really closely with our foundation. I mean, I probably see someone from our foundation at least once a week. And I've been very involved in planning various events to bring alumni back to campus, re-engage with alumni and industry partners. So it's all on that part of it. And my role largely has been that of developing the relationship, and then the foundation gets involved. So, and we haven't gotten millions yet, but we're headed that direction. And we need to go there, and we know we need to. Does that answer your question, Michelle? Yeah, so.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Zare from Gender and Women's Studies. I'm glad you mentioned World Languages Day, which is a great success on our campus, but I guess on a more concerning note, we have gotten rid of the language requirement in the Arts and Science College recently. I can't speak to the other colleges, but in general, basically, we've dismantled our requirements with a focus on four-year graduation rates, which is a national trend I'm sure you're aware of. Right. So I just wondered if you could comment on that, because I understand that individual departments can decide to have a language requirement, but for instance, a science department that I'm aware of, had this conversation, and the people at the table who've had positive and important experiences with foreign language argued for it, but they were outnumbered by the people who said, no, we'd rather have them take extra classes in science. So I'm just curious if you could speak to gently and slowly changing that culture.
Yeah, it's really challenging because we understand, right, what our students really need. I mean, it's this tension, and what it really gets back to is they should have had it in school, in high school. But it gets back to that problem, right? And it's not the only thing, right, that maybe should have been covered. And not to criticize, our teachers work very hard. It's an institutional problem, right? So how can we address it? What we're trying to propose, and I know they've done this at River Falls, is somehow then foreign languages have to count to fulfill some gen ed objective, okay? That's it. Because I understand, right, the sciences, I understand that, and it's a real dilemma. So what my colleague did, this is a colleague in Moscow, did they have similar conversations? It was a great political challenge, although you can do things differently there, because change there comes top down, so he could just do it, right? I don't want to say gutted their gen ed program, but he radically transformed it, so it's pretty much this language study now. So what you could do is, you don't have to let other people know I said this maybe. I'm just, thinking out loud, right? So you can accomplish a lot in a language class, and I know some schools are looking at doing this, that the language course isn't just language. It's language in history or language in culture or language in anthropology or something like that. So you embed it, and then there's questions, are you meeting your linguistic objectives? But maybe there's a different way to get it somehow into the gen ed curriculum. And I guess that's what I would look at doing. Because I do understand that, I understand all the pressures. And one of the difficulties we have is this focus on graduation in 4 years. Well, that's very difficult to do if we have so many requirements that are required by, we talked about ABET earlier. We have NASAD accreditation, right? It's really hard to do to maintain your accreditation, so you need to look to do it someplace else. And then really just maybe start focusing on the schools. I don't know. It's a really hard dilemma. I know it's my field, so I'm really passionate about it. I could just say you should make those students just take it anyway, but I know it's realistically that's really challenging. And then people will say there's 1 year of a foreign language. It depends on the language, but what do you really accomplish with that? And so then it gets back to what I was talking about with objectives, and maybe you embed. When I taught this Russia-Soviet Union culture course at Iowa, we would always have a language component. I would always teach them the alphabet. I'd say, come on, the Cyrillic alphabet? I taught 7th graders the alphabet, actually 8-year-olds in 1 day. If an 8-year-old can learn the alphabet in 1 day, it's not that hard. And it's a barrier. All of a sudden you know the alphabet, you can read the street signs, right? And so you can embed something, and then you hope that the student will develop a passion and then they'll go to an intensive summer program. You can start intensive summer programs too. I know you're doing that in some languages, so. Sorry.
We have time for like half of the question.
I'll jump in really quick with a question I know one of my colleagues had about your approach to risk management in study abroad programs, and how you would, if you've had challenging situations you've dealt with before, what your approach would be, since we do live in a turbulent world.
Right. We have protocols, and so we follow our protocols. Right. You need to have a risk management committee that reviews periodically. Also, we're part of UW System, so UW System has certain, the international directors from around the state meet every semester, and we have maybe not common protocols, but we have various. I won't be able to give a half-minute answer, but we have insurance that they all have to buy. We have this service called Red 24. We get world updates every morning, really early in the morning, like at 4 in the morning. You can read the world update. So if something's going on in a country where you know of students, you know right away that day. But we have, it's a phone tree, right? The international director calls someone, and then they call me, or they call the police, and it goes so forth. But when something happens in another country, whoever is on the ground, which is why it's really, really important to send people where they know people or where you have good infrastructure. Otherwise, you're in trouble, right? I can give you some examples maybe later, but you need to have that infrastructure. You cannot send somebody with a group of students to a country where they have no facility with the language and they don't know the culture, and you're not partnering with another institution. You're setting yourself up for trouble. So you have to really be careful that all that groundwork is done in advance, because you're working with the local law enforcement agencies, which I have done, right? We've had cases, but then you're working through all their legal systems, so you've got to have somebody who knows their legal system, which means you need to have partners on the ground, which is part of what this insurance and this Red 24, and then we've got our own partners. So does that answer your question? I mean, and those protocols are developed in advance, so when you have an emergency, then you implement, you know what to do. Thank you all very much. And then if any of you have answers to any of the most difficult questions, you can email me as well. Okay? You can find me easily online, or David can give you my email address. I'm always happy to learn. Well, yeah, I know that's an excellent question, and I don't necessarily want to say we've had incidents, and everybody's had incidents, and yeah, and I know with the whole stuff with terrorism, it's just like, but life is risk. This gets back to the Slavic background, right? Life is risk. It's this whole fatalistic. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You can't stop it from happening, right? Yeah, there's...
Oh, can you hear me at all? Sean? Hey, Sean, can you hear me? I'm actually here. I got to watch from Cheyenne.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Hi. Oh, you developed a program in Sarasota, right? Great. That was just super. I don't know if I'm supposed to turn this off now. Did I turn this off?